12, introduction and first read of an ordinance amending Fountain Valley Municipal Code 8.55.040, repealing section 8.55.045, and amending section 12.08.095 to remove limitations adopted after Martin versus City of Boise and to codify a 60-day storage period for personal property. Presentation by Colin Burns.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and I'll note for the record that the title on the agenda matches the title of the ordinance, so we don't need to read ordinance this time. So thank you for taking that step, especially because that was the longest title. So what we're proposing is an ordinance amending the Fountain Valley Municipal Code to remove the limitations that were put in after the Martin versus Boise decision and to codify a 60-day holding period for personal property that's confiscated from the public right-of-way. A little background on Martin versus City of Boise. The case came out. It was a Ninth Circuit case that prohibited cities or local agencies from enforcing anti-camping laws unless the jurisdiction had enough shelter beds for every unhoused person. Following the Martin decision, to prevent there being a facial challenge to our ordinance, we amended the ordinance to provide that the city will not enforce its anti-camping provisions in the public right-of-way unless the city had enough shelter beds. The city did leave its park closure in place. Many cities, including Fountain Valley, unhoused persons were able to refuse offers of shelter, knowing that there shelter beds for everyone. In other words, if a city had 10 available shelter beds, but 11 unhoused persons, the city couldn't ask one single person to use a shelter bed until it had enough for every person. The U.S. Supreme Court recently issued a decision called Grants Pass that overruled the Martin case. Fountain Valley actually joined the amicus brief in that case. The Supreme Court held that the Eighth Amendment does not prohibit a local government from criminalizing camping in public places. It is not cruel and unusual punishment, and local governments can determine for themselves what is the best way to deal with the crisis of the unhoused. Essential considerations of federalism mandate that the people and their elected representatives are able to decide how best to handle a pressing social question like homelessness. Fountain Valley has, with council direction, taken a compassionate approach. We first attempt to provide services, outreach, assistance in obtaining temporary and permanent housing. The city has spent millions of dollars providing services via CityNet, staff time, and in joining the cities of Garden Grove, Westminster, and constructing and operating the Central Cities Navigation Center, providing wraparound services for unhoused individuals who are willing to accept those services. Some unhoused individuals have continued to reject the city's offers of shelter, choosing instead to remain in public places, which thereby prevents those areas from being used by the public for the purpose they were intended. In those cases, for a person who is refusing shelter, criminal enforcement can be an effective tool after we have tried to reach out and be compassionate. Also, the city's ordinance does ban storing camp paraphernalia on public property, and it bans storing personal property in city parks after the park has been closed. Due process says that if we confiscate property that's been stored in public areas, we have to hold it for a reasonable period of time. The governor's recent order says hold property for 60 days. That's why the ordinance suggests 60 days. Any reasonable period of time will suffice. It is staff's recommendation that the council adopt the proposed ordinance, removing the Martin versus Boise limitation against enforcing, and also codifying a 60-day hold, but any other reasonable period would suffice. And I'm available for questions.
Yeah, this is something, if you attended the homelessness town hall last Wednesday, that this is what we were talking about at the time, that we were bringing the ordinance back at the next city council meeting that will basically remove the caveat we had in our existing ordinance because of the ruling that was the courts before. So it will allow us to have more control over enforcing the law and with this ordinance. Any questions for our city attorney?
Yes.
Councilmember Constantine.
So I really like this. This is going to help not only our community, but the unhoused themselves to really get into a better situation and onto a better future. As far as the 60 days go, with what I said taking place, I feel that it's in our city's best interest to hold the property for 30 days. And I'll tell you why. Why? Why would be to further help this person move on onto a better life. Just moving on to the future, I think 60 days is excessive. If you really think about it, 60 days is really excessive.
So just to clarify that, if we hold it for 60 days, that means up to 60 days. If they wanted it sooner, they could, of course, come take it sooner, correct?
Right. It's 60 days before we can dispose of the property. They can come get it on day one.
Right.
Yeah, that's exactly what you just said. I think we did discuss about this. The challenge is if we hold less than 60 days and we dispose of the items and they go back and they want the homeless person with the advocate challenging that because the state says 60 days and we dispose before the 60 days.
Yeah, it's what's reasonable. We use 60 days because the state said 60 days, so I had a benchmark to point to. But that doesn't mean that 30 days wouldn't be reasonable.
Okay.
And it would be known to the unhoused person what the timing is.
But that also means that the city could dispose sooner than 60 days.
Well,
We
if
do it
there's
30 days.
something, I mean, in my paperwork, I mean, if there's something that's, sketchy, if there's something hazardous, this sort of a thing, if there's, that's different.
Well, I think anything that's hazardous, I think, or we determine that to be disposed right away if
Right.
it becomes unsafe.
Okay, at
Correct.
this
Yeah.
point, this is a public hearing, so I know there are people who want to speak on this one too. So I'm going to open the public hearing. Are there any requests to speak?
I have no request to speak on this item.
Okay, public hearing is now closed. We did our job. And do I hear a
Yeah, I have a,
motion?
I have a question. So I'm in agreement with Councilmember Constantine. I think if reasonable, if we have some discretion, what I heard at I think the homeless town hall was anywhere between 30 and 90 days would be reasonable. So I'm fine with 30 days, and if it becomes a problem, we can move it later. But it'll give people more of an incentive to, figure out what to do with their property.
Yeah, I don't agree with that. I don't think 30 days is enough for somebody who's been living on the street for potentially years. They have their stuff taken, and they're trying to figure out, and they're going through a system. I'd like to ask, this might be putting you guys on the spot, Captain DeSantis or Chief Ishii or somebody on what kind of imposition is that to the police department to hold items for 30 versus 60 days?
So depending on the size of the property, some of it will get stored at the police department, but a lot of the big items will be stored at the city yard. So with the 60 days, it's kind of my opinion that this stuff will pile up. At the police department in particular, a lot of these persons have bicycles. And so when we collect those bicycles, many times they don't come, and it just piles up and creates an overflow.
I see Scott walked
Yeah,
into the room.
they're
Scott,
here.
you want to add
Perhaps
to
they can attest to the piles of property that accumulate at the city yard that sit there for 60 days.
Welcome, Scott, our Public Works Director.
Thank you. Honorable Mayor, council members, we can accommodate either 60 days or 30 days. Right now, we've been storing it, and it's not a problem. I understand that the dialogue's gone back and forth, but we can find a way to accommodate either.
Okay, I appreciate that. Let's think for a second, guys. These are humans. They've just lost everything. This is their life possessions. And after 30 days, we're just going to toss it. I mean, that's literally what we're going to do. We're going to throw away everything they own after 30 days. Let's have a little bit more compassion. It's not a problem for Public Works. It's not a huge expense to the city. Let's do the right thing. Let's do it for 60 days.
I have something more to say. A lot of
Actually,
these,
Vice Mayor Bowie. you asked first. Go ahead.
Go for it.
Thank you, Mayor Granis. I agree with you that 30 days may not be enough because they don't have a place. But I also want to, if we put this ordinance in place, and keep in mind, I think the last discussion we had, I think it's about 115 homeless throughout the city, unhousing populations.
114.
114. So if the 60 days and we start going through and the pile of their belongings start to accumulate, it gets to the point that it's not manageable. Is it too much to ask to come back, hey, we need to change that ordinance to 30 days?
No, it's not too much to ask.
So that's something to consider.
Councilmember Canine, you have a thought on this?
I want to be cognizant of, kind of legal advice. And I think the 60 days starts with something that the governor's presented. I think that's something that we could work with. But I also agree, maybe we test this, and an ordinance is something that is meant to be flexible. And if it's not working, then maybe we come back and talk about it. But I think 60 days is a good starting point for us, all things considered.
Thank you. Councilmember Constantine?
Yeah, so for an ordinance to change, it would have to get on the city council agenda, and we vote on it. Then it goes again for the second read at the next meeting or a future meeting, and then after that, if it goes well or, whatever, it's the 30 day for the change. Once off the street, and these people are choosing to be on our streets, many of them for a very long time. So once they're off the street, they're getting into a better situation not to return to the streets. So why we should harbor these items and store them for 60 days, to me, doesn't make any sense. You're not effectively helping the unhoused person by continuing to store their items for up to 60 days. We don't have room at our police department, and I've been to the yard. I'm just telling you.
The Public Works Director said that he's able to accommodate that. I will tell you that, think about this. Somebody is on the street, maybe under some sort of drugs or alcohol abuse. They go to a shelter. They take a week or so to detox. Then it's going to take time for these people to get placed somewhere. The goal is for them to have long-term permanent housing. We know that the shelters, they said that the people are going to stay 60 days or beyond. Let's be humans here. Let's give these people a little bit of a break. It's not costing us a ton of money. It's not a problem for the Public Works Department. They've already said that. If it becomes a huge burden, which it won't, then we can always go in 60 days' time. We could change the ordinance right back to a 30-day. And you know what? We'll all be able to sleep a lot better at night and be better people. So for that, I'm going to make the motion that we approve the ordinance as read.
Second.
All right, so we have a first and a second.
Can I comment?
Please.
Yeah. So although I appreciate all the feedback, so I'd be supportive of the 60 day period.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those
Aye.
opposed?
Well,
Oh.
I like the first part of it, but the second part's a no, so let's go with a no.
Motion passes 4-1.
All right, thank you.